Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, bringing back coffee break here at AvidMax, sitting here with Brady. Let's jump right into it. 10-foot rods today.
10-foot rods today with Noah as well. We got Noah and Brady coming at you today. Going to talk about 10-foot rods. Talk a lot about 10-foot rods in the shop. It's a conversation often.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
The thing about 10-foot rods, though, is I feel like it's a newer concept that everyone's been talking about.
Seems to be more modern.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I think a lot of times we see a lot of maybe older customers coming in and say like, hey, what's up with all these 10-foot rods? Maybe George Daniels has been talking about it a lot.
Sure.
And just kind of these bigger names in the industry that people are just wanting to know what's the buzz around 10-foot rods. So today we want to kind of let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about the benefit of them and maybe why you might find that you would want a 10-foot rod as opposed to 9.
Sure. And if you think George Daniels, you think competition style, European style nymphing, right? And that might be a large part of where this came from.
Sure.
That longer reach kind of nymphing style rods, your tight line nymphing style rods, where you need that extra extension to kind of get out, touch those fish, find those seams that you might not be able to get to otherwise, allows for a little more control. Seems to be kind of the starting place.
Sure.
Euro became popular. People are recognizing that there's a place for longer rods.
And one thing that I've noticed too while getting out on the river is there will be a lot of guys who go, I use Euro as just simply a technique, like anything else. I'm not, I don't know, live and die by the Euro technique, but I'm going to more or less use it in the right conditions.
Right.
And we're filming this in winter. Now is a perfect time to be using it.
Totally.
So I've been seeing a lot more individuals using longer rods now to kind of use that Euro style. But that actually leads me to my first question I have for you, Brady. Please debunk for us, are 10-foot rods just used for Euro nymphing?
No, absolutely not. So, as you know, I have a lengthy arsenal of 10-foot rods. It probably makes up half of my rod arsenal at this point. I have some shorter rods, I have some 9-foot rods, but then I have a large amount of 10-foot rods. And for me, in my application, it is mostly nymphing. That's when I'm using a 10-foot rod or longer. When you go longer than 10 and 11, then you're kind of talking about that spay stuff. You go into the single hand spay and then beyond that. But sort of staying in that 10-foot range is a great nymphing stick. So, and maybe even beyond that, just subsurface, right? So if you're fishing subsurface on still water, a 10-foot rod can be great. If you're fishing subsurface on rivers, a 10-foot rod can be great. And like you said, not just tight line. You can definitely fish an indicator rig with a 10-foot rod, and there's a ton of benefits to that.
Sure.
Whether that be the mending ability to the rod, having that little extra tip section, a little foot makes a big difference, right?
Well, one thing I've noticed with that too, and this surprised me a little bit, but once you kind of realize it conceptually, it makes perfect sense. 10-foot rods have been incredibly beneficial when swinging flies.
Sure.
Wet flies, streamers, however you want to do it. You could even use, depending on that 10-foot rod, you could even do a single hand spay techniques with it.
Yeah.
And they're honestly really versatile.
Some water loaded casts.
Yeah.
Roll casting.
Sure. Yeah. And they're very fun. I've really enjoyed using one. I do have a rod over 10 feet and I love it. But I do think there's that balance where now kind of knowing what I know about it, I don't really know if I would go past 10. I don't really know if I'd recommend a 10.5 to be as versatile as just a straight 10.
Sure.
Because I almost feel like once you hit 10.5, 11, those really do cross over into that, let's say, exclusive Euro stick, where 10 seems to be an okay middle ground that you can still do some indicator nymphing with, streamer fishing with.
Takes you a little bit beyond that 9-foot rod.
Sure.
Allows you to do some different things.
Sure.
But doesn't push you beyond the boundaries of still fishing your regular trout tactics.
Sure.
With a 10-foot rod.
So here's kind of a second question I got, because I anticipate maybe some of the viewers might be wanting to know. Let's say I want to move past the 9-foot rod, and now I'm looking at a 10-foot rod, but I just realized that some manufacturers make a 9.5-foot rod.
Sure.
What would be the benefit of me going to the 10 from a 9.5? Is there even a benefit of that? We don't see them being as popular 9.5.
Yeah.
But maybe you want to talk about on that just a bit.
We do see that same kind of breadth. It's a lot in the stillwater world. You see a lot of that 9.6 stuff to get a little bit extra reach. I would say take it to the next level personally. Yeah. I think when you're talking about 6 inches, if you can get an extra 6 inches, that lever overall is going to add. I don't know the physics behind it, right?
Sure.
Not
Yeah, sure.
But you get extra reach overall for every additional dimension added to your rod, right? So if you increase it beyond that, you're getting to get a little bit further out. You're getting a little to touch those fish that you might not be able to otherwise.
Sure.
9.6 is pretty close to a 9-foot, right? And so I feel like you're not quite pushing yourself to the benefits that you would see from a 10-foot.
Sure.
And maybe pulling yourself away from the benefits of a 9-foot rod, right?
Sure.
Because there are cons at the same time to a 10-foot rod.
There are.
Right.
So I think one of the biggest hindrances for 10-foot rod is dry fly fishing, and it sucks and it hurts my heart dearly because I love dry fly fishing. So for someone who
Dry or die, Noah.
dude, that is me, man. If you look at my pack, it's almost exclusively dry flies. Got a few Euro bugs in there, but a lot of dries. So for me, the idea of switching to a 10-foot rod wasn't appealing initially. Because traditionally I took that minimalist approach. I want to take one really good rod that's versatile and I can fish in any application. But recently I started understanding that if I take two rods, and one of them is a 10-foot rod, and the other is my dry fly rod, I am actually better prepared for both situations than if I were to just take one versatile rod.
Yeah.
So especially right here in the wintertime. We're fishing in January, nothing's rising, and if I decided to stick to dries all day, I'd probably catch maybe one fish, and it's not going to be a big fish. And that's it. But if I switch to a designated indicator rig and I can use some Euro tactics, I can throw whatever type, indicator rig I want to throw, I have a lot better chances of catching fish, and I almost guarantee that you'd catch more fish.
That's the reality of it, right? Fish are feeding subsurface.
Yeah.
So we all want to catch them on dry flies as much as we can. But they are eaten below the water a lot of the time.
They are.
Yeah. And so the con there is really just the presentation isn't quite as nice as you might find on a shorter rod, right? That accuracy is just harder to maintain, right? You have a longer rod. You're going to tracking that rod in your cast, the more you add to it just makes it more difficult. And that's why the spey casting stuff, I guess I'm sort of taking a guess at this, right? I don't know for sure, but spey casting is all water load casting. You have those big long rods. You're really leveraging the lever of the rod by using those casting styles. So you're not overhand casting them, right? They're not meant to be tracked straight on a plane to have a tight loop and lay down real nice. But you can do it still.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't fish a dry fly on a 10-foot rod.
No, and actually, I've really enjoyed taking a 10-foot rod up to alpine lakes here in Colorado. This is going to open up, a can of worms for this whole topic right now. But, when you're fishing cruising fish or you're casting towards cruising fish, you want accuracy, right? So I'm going to bring the rod that I know that I can cast those fish. But in the same breath, if I'm going to a lake that I know is more remote, more secluded, those fish are more apt to really take anything that's thrown at them. I will take that 10-foot rod because I have a better chance of getting my line further out there.
Get distance, yeah.
And at that point, fishing that scenario, I'm not actually worried all that much about my accuracy on my dry fly as much as I want to get it out there.
I think that's a great perspective to have, and that goes into fishing situations, right? Just what situation are you fishing and what's going to be the right tool for the job. How many times have you been in an alpine lake where there's a shelf 30 feet out, 40 feet out, whatever it might be, and if you don't get to that shelf, you're not going to get a fish.
No.
They might not be cruising. Maybe it's later in the summer. It's a little bit warmer. They're deeper, and they're sitting out further. If you don't get out there, you're not going to get them. But if you're anywhere out there, you're going to get them, right? So you don't have to be accurate necessarily.
Sure.
But you need the distance.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And they brought up a really good point in one of the Orvis podcasts a while back, where Tom was basically talking about how he liked using leaders that were over a standard 9 feet. And I have felt that when you're wanting to use leaders over 9 feet, using a 10-foot rod definitely helps managing that longer leader.
Sure.
Especially in these situations where we're at mountain lakes and you want that longer leader. Maybe it's going to be a really bright day and maybe these fish are really, really spooky. And you're throwing a long section of 6, maybe 7. I know I'm going to get hate for that. Maybe 8. I don't even know. I won't even stop. Maybe
they make 8X.
Maybe I'll go to 10 trout hunter. No. But, okay, so let's just say you're going up to 6, 7 or something like that. It's really nice to have a longer section of that, which is easy to manage with a 10-foot rod, too.
Totally.
The other thing I wanted to kind of dig into regarding the 10-foot rods is outside of using them out west, can I use them in general trout fishing applications?
Yeah, I would say absolutely, right? I think the benefits are there in the right situation. If you have the river that is conducive for it. And I think that might be something that you run into out east more so than we do out west here. And I'm a Colorado boy, so this is what I'm familiar with.
Sure.
Right, we're fishing out most of the time in the wide open plains and in the mountains and stuff. There are creeks that are pretty brush heavy, and that's when a 10-foot rod might not be as beneficial to you. If you can't make those casts, if you can't wield the rod around just because you have too much brush, that can be a prohibiting factor.
There you go.
So.
So this leads me into another question I'm thinking about. We have a guy who comes into the shop, and this is just purely for example, and he goes, I'm looking to get into fly fishing. Should I get a 10-foot rod? Would you recommend a 10-foot rod to a novice angler, or would you say that there's that point that you eventually have to gain a certain level of knowledge, understanding before you move into that?
There's definitely different perspectives on this one as well. It can be thought of, I think, from different mindsets. I've had some very, very proficient, very excellent casters tell me in the past that if they were to take somebody of small stature or a beginner and put a rod in their hand, they would put a longer rod in their hand. And it goes back to that longer lever again, right? They don't have to work as hard to get that rod to do the work, to translate through the line, to make that presentation. I think why you see shorter rods when you're looking at youth outfits and stuff like that, or typically that 8'6", is just because that kid is managing the rod.
Sure,
right?
sure.
There's more likelihood that it's going to break if it's a longer rod.
Sure.
But a 10-foot rod can really help and kind of add that extra power and that extra action overall to somebody that might not have that casting stroke down yet, and can kind of help them along, again, in the right situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to put it too. I mean, ideally, if you're learning how to cast, I'm going to just probably recommend going to just a standard 9'5" weight rod that we've all learned on. The truth is, you probably learned on a 5 or 6, but it was a standard, it was your dad's old rod. Yep. That's really what we all learned to cast on.
Totally. And the part of that too is when people are starting to fish, they want to go out and fish dry flies.
They do.
Right? Everybody that starts fly fishing.
Good call.
They've seen everybody casting dry flies, the rise to the fly, all that stuff, so they want to cast dry flies. So that 9-foot's going to be a better option.
Sure.
I would say the 10-foot person is more that person that has their 9-foot rod. They're kind of happy with it. They've caught fish. They've done different tactics, but now they're looking for something different, and they want to be very specific. Maybe they want to step into the Euro world, and they want that 10-foot rod. Maybe they do want a dedicated nymphing stick, and then they're going to have a dry fly rod. That's really where it shines. And if you're able to do that and kind of build out that arsenal, like Noah was saying earlier, where you've got with 2 rods, you can be so effective throughout the day and kind of match what's going on instead of being pigeonholed in one tactic.
I think that's excellent right there too. And I think a common belief within the industry is, I'm using a standard 9-foot rod because it's versatile in most situations.
Yeah.
But if I were to redo my whole setup, I would go with a 7.6 for creeks.
Okay.
I'd go with an 8.5.
3-weight or 2-weight on the 7.6?
I'd go 2, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend it because a 2, it's not the best for throwing dropper rigs. It's not the best for heavier flies, but it's really fun.
It's very limited.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So let's just say 3.
Yeah.
I'd go up to an 8.5-foot 4-weight for my dry fly rod.
Okay.
I used to always say 9-foot 4-weight, but I would actually go 8.5 because realistically, you're not doing a hero cast to dries.
Sure.
You're not doing that cast where you're like, man, I'm double hauling because I'm fishing for permit or something. It's not that.
Right.
You're feeding to rising
you're not
fish.
Out on the flats, yeah.
No. You're casting or feeding fish that aren't too far away from you. So I don't think you need that 9-foot rod.
But you got to put it where you want to put it.
But you do,
yeah.
and I think you can be very accurate with an 8.5.
Yeah.
And then I would jump up to a 10-foot rod.
Okay.
And that's exactly how I would run my
bypass
setup.
the 9-foot rod altogether.
Yep.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Yeah.
Bypass the 9-foot rod. No, I mean,
I've kind of grown into that same place myself, and I think you probably talk to a lot of seasoned anglers that have found that to be true in their rods as well. Yeah.
I think the last thing that I really want to get into too is there is definitely movement as an angler as we develop. Brady can talk about it a little bit more, but what's the mentality when you're first starting versus once you have a year under your belt, 2 years?
Sure.
I've now hit 5 years. How do you think your mentality shifted?
Well, so there's the evolution of an angler, right?
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the evolution of an angler, where you start out and you just want to catch a fish. You want to get out and you want to catch a fish. Then you want to catch a bunch of fish. Then you want to catch the big fish. I think also there's a path where people want to catch fish, and then they want to catch a bunch of fish, and then they realize that those big fish are in a location where a lot of other people are, and then they go and chase locations, right?
Sure.
They might change that mindset around a little bit and say, no, I just want to go and explore the beauty and the wild places around that. But along with that comes the strategy, the technique, and the tools for that, and having the right tools to approach those situations.
And that's what I was getting to is once you get to a point, well, at least what I believe, once you're ready to start saying, I'm serious as an angler, I'm not just there to catch a fish, but I'm there to catch a fish that meets this specific criteria, and I want to catch this species of fish. I want to
Sure.
catch an 18-inch fish.
Very focused
Yes.
fishing, yes.
I think that at that point you go, let me
Yeah.
dial in on my rod.
Totally.
Let me actually dial in on the manufacturer who I think best allows me to have the best cast.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that 10-foot rod allows so much potential with catching fish.
Totally.
Whether you're, nymphing deep runs or using it at a lake, it's not utilized right now.
If we were to wrap it up under one word, it would be fishability.
Fishability,
I think
there you
it's
go.
really the fishability of the rod, and it might sacrifice a little bit on that dry fly side of things, but you can still throw a dry fly. Doesn't mean you can't throw a dry fly.
Sure.
It's just not going to be as accurate as a 9-foot or an 8-foot-4 rod might be. But you can do it all with it. You can be very effective nymphing with it in different techniques. You can throw streamers with it, and then you can also still present a dry fly when you need to, when they're rising. So
No, and I think that's perfect. And man, that's really everything that I had. I'd say the last thing I want to wrap up with it. Let's just clarify a little bit. Maybe we've convinced some of our viewers, fingers crossed, to get a 10-foot rod because you guys will love it.
you won't be sorry. Yeah.
You won't be sorry. But now I want to talk very briefly about what weight to get.
Sure.
Because I think
That's good.
weight
That's
can
a
be
great
very
concept, yeah.
confusing. If you see a 10-foot one weight, I will put money on it that is exclusively a Euro 10
Sure. Yes, it's going to have a fighting butt on it.
Right,
It's going to be a down locking
right.
rod. Yeah.
So, Brady, maybe you want to tackle this one a little
Sure,
bit?
sure.
What weight should I get?
For me, it tends to be in the lighter weights for
Okay.
sure. And so, like you said, maybe not a one weight for everybody,
Sure.
but a one weight might have its place for you in your fishing scenarios. But that 2 to 4 weight is really solid in that Euro range.
Sure.
You can kind of take that 3 to 5 weight range and be that in your indicator range. Once you start going heavier weights than that, I kind of cap out at 5 weight for
I would agree with
myself
that.
personally.
I would agree with
I
that.
think the 9.6 is a good option in the 6 weight. If you were talking like a streamer rod potentially, and maybe
Okay.
like a Stillwater subsurface rod.
Wait, 10.6 or 9.6?
Sorry, 9.6.
Oh, 9, okay.
9.6 6 weight is a good.
Oh, okay.
So not quite pushing to that 10-foot.
Sure.
In the 6 weight. But one of the things you do lose in a 10-foot rod, because it's a longer blank overall, and you got a little more tip sensitivity into it because that taper of the rod is going to be adjusted throughout with the longer rod, you lose a little bit of fighting ability.
Okay.
And so if you're thinking about bigger fish, bigger water, and that kind of stuff, that 6 weight might be a better option than a 9-foot rod.
Okay.
So that might be
a
something
good
to
point.
just kind of consider as you're going through it too.
Sure, and I think Brady really, gave the best explanation of that. If you're looking to do exclusively Euro, stick between that 1 and 3 weight. I would say that anyone who jumps up to go a 10-foot 4 weight, exclusively for Euro, will be a little disappointed.
Yeah, you're not going to get the feel that you might
Right.
want out of it. Yeah.
However, I do know that there are a few models out there who have really tried to emphasize versatility. I know NRX is one of them. That their 10-foot 4 weight, they said, you can best of both worlds.
Right.
Indicators and Euro.
Right.
But ideally with Euro, you're looking for sensitivity, so I'd really recommend 10-foot 2 weights, actually 10-foot 3 weights.
Sure.
Once you hit that 4 and 5, I think that's actually a very versatile trout rod for you.
Yeah.
That you would still be able to throw some drives with it and also throw some streamers. Because if I'm getting a 10-foot rod, I also want to be able to make sure that I can do other applications with it.
Yeah. Especially if you're talking about like jig streamers and stuff
There
like
you go.
that.
There you go.
Smaller, like woolly bugger profiled type streamers. And then we actually have one in the vise randomly there too. But
Well, see, that's actually a very underutilized technique as well.
Sure.
That is lights out. You'll have a lights out day if you use that.
it's funny because that's sort of we're like, I always joke that we're blending the worlds together a little bit, right? Between fly fishing and conventional fishing a little bit.
Sure.
We're moving a lot of hardware into our rigs in fly fishing.
Sure.
And then we're also, jigging streamers and stuff like that. And the 10-foot
yeah.
world is definitely seems to be in line with that very much, right? That competition world, that longer rod, that technical angler is exploring things very differently than the more traditional angler might have been.
Well,
angler.
it's funny because if you were to, I'd make the argument that if you take some of these small, let's call them micro jig streamers or anything like that, load them up in a box, and if you go to a crappie angler and say, show me what's in your tackle box, They're
Oh, totally.
Yeah, they're right
It's going to
there.
look a lot very similar.
But don't worry,
Yeah.
it's not it's not a crappie tackle. This is fly fishing tackle.
Fluor? Not a fluor?
It's not a fluor.
No, it's a fly still.
No,
You're
it is a
good.
fly.
You're good.
Well, cool, man. I mean, that was everything that I had on 10-foot rods. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else?
No, I don't think so. I would just say give us a shout if you're thinking about it.
No,
Give us
for
a
sure.
call. We definitely have the team that can help you make these decisions. Once you get to this point, there's a thought process that's sort of beyond just the I need a trout rod and I want to go out trout fishing. We're happy to have those conversations with you. So give us a shout and we'll help figure out what the right rod would be for you.
Yeah, we definitely. If you give us a call, we will give you a list of rods to take a look at. We love to guide you during this decision-making process. It is tough, but that's why we're here to help. So
All the comparisons too that you can look at. So
Brady, how do you think the first coffee break went?
coffee break went well. Yeah,
Coffee break went
thanks
well.
for tuning in, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers
Appreciate it.
out there.
See you next time.
Take care.